Hi everyone. So as some of you know, I currently write a sports blog, but I decided to try something new. I want to start up this podcast, hoping that it kind of adds to the sports analyzing that I currently do. Maybe give you a little more in depth as to some of my thoughts about what's going on in the sports world. So I'm going to try to do this. I'm going to say about once a week, maybe twice a week. And we're just going to talk about the not issues, but things that are going on in the sports world during that week. So I want to start off. This is obviously the first episode. So we're going to talk about three different things today. So we're going to talk about the Toronto Blue Jays off-season overview. We're going to preview the Raptors season. And we're just going to give some quick-fire thoughts into all four of the major professional sports leagues. So, like I said, this is the first episode. We currently do not have a name for the project, so if you have any suggestions as to what we could call it, I'm certainly open to anything. Right now I'm planning on just calling it Ben's Sports Podcast, so I think we need something a little better than that, so please send me any suggestions you have. So, alright, let's start off with the Toronto Blue Jays and their offseason overview. Obviously, a disappointing loss to Kansas City in the American League Championship Series. But, I think this is kind of a building block for the team in years to come. It kind of put Toronto baseball back on the map. I think we were able to attract a lot of attention with the big acquisitions we made. Obviously, Troy Tulowitzki, David Price, really important names that are going to only help the club in the future attract better free agents, especially with the atmosphere we were able to let these players play in front of at the Rogers Center. So I don't know if many of you know, but Alex Anthopoulos just had his postseason press conference, or I should say off-season press conference, where he kind of talked about his thoughts on the season and what they're going to do going forward. He obviously did not address his contract issue. I expect the Jays will definitely give him a new contract after all the moves he made to get them to where they are today. So I don't think that'll be a problem. I think he will be the GM for years to come, along with, and he'll work together with Mark Shapiro, their new president. But I mean, he really said what you expected him to say. He said the loss to Kansas City was tough. They're a good team. Blah blah blah. Disappointed, but they'll be back next year. I mean, you can't really expect him to say anything besides that. And then talking about certain players, he said exactly what you thought he would. He said they'll be in the mix for Price. Hopefully they'll be able to re-sign him. They'd love to have him back. Same thing with Estrada. They'd love to bring him back for years to come. They're going to try to re-sign him. Talking about the outfield, he said the outfield is deep. And then he basically implied they're going to pick up the option on Ari Dickey's contract. So those four things, nothing really stands out from that. I think it's what everyone expected. I expect they'll pursue Price, pursue Estrada. Whether or not they have success with that, we'll see. But definitely no surprise there. The only surprise from his conference really came when he talked about the bullpen, in particular Sanchez and Osuna. He talked about their future with the club, saying hopefully they turn them into starters someday, which I was a little surprised at. Sanchez, I can see. Sanchez has even some starting experience in Major League Baseball, but for Osuna's first year as a big leaguer, I think he really kind of showed the team that they have something special. Maybe at the back end of that bullpen for years to come. I don't necessarily think you want to turn him into a starter or have that mentality when you're developing him. I think you definitely have something special in that back end. Someone who isn't afraid to throw a fastball, developing a slider, but really can just blow it by you when you need a big strikeout. So I think you're I'm not saying he's anywhere near this skill set, but I think you have a potential of Mariano Rivera on your hands if you can kind of develop him properly. So I think the focus needs to be on developing him as a reliever, not necessarily a starter. He's had success in the big leagues as a reliever, so why kind of change the formula? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And it's kind of my thinking there. So that's the only real surprise from that press conference. Other than that, I think the only other thing that we really need to talk about in terms of the Jays this offseason is going to be their need for starting pitching. I mean, most of the lineup is back. They're still going to mash. They're still going to crush teams with the long ball. I think they're going to maybe make a focus on trying to play a little more small ball. I think that's what kind of screwed them over in the series against Kansas City. So I expect them to go out and maybe grab another left-handed bat uh, for the in the off season, just to kind of balance that lineup out. Maybe not a masher as a lefty. You're not going to go out and sign Chris Davis, that's for sure. But maybe a guy who will get on base, might not have the power numbers. Guy similar to Ben Revere. Just kind of add that balance to the lineup. But I think starting pitching definitely needs to be the concern this off season. I mean, you're probably going to lose David Price unless they decide to pretty much write him a blank check. Estrada, I think you're going to have a team that's probably going to overpay for him. So I can't imagine he'll be back. It would be awesome if he is, but I expect some team will look at his playoff performance and give him something north of $10 million a year, which I just don't think the Jays will do. Mark Burley, if he doesn't retire, I expect him to end up elsewhere. So again, some team will sign him to a contract that the Jays just don't feel he's worth. We'll pick up the option on R.A. Dickey. I expect we will. I know it's a big option, $12 million, but he pitched great down the stretch. I mean, he had that one bad playoff start, but other than that, he was great this year. So I think if you look at our rotation, it's really only Dickey and Stroman are the two pitchers that you're confident in. So I think you need to definitely go out and grab someone to complement Stroman at the top of that rotation. I mean, if we ended up going Dickey, Stroman, and even like Hutchison, or even converting Sanchez back into a starter, that's not good. That makes for a scary next season. So I think that if you look at some of the guys out there, I think most of the attention is going to be surrounding Price. Price and Greinke for sure. So I think obviously it would be nice to have one of those two, but I think you're going to have to look elsewhere, unfortunately. I think some of the teams are just going to end up paying ridiculous amounts of money for him. So even looking at maybe the third or fourth option on there, so obviously Johnny Cueto sticks out. He did nothing to help his contract situation in the playoffs, and even leading up to the playoffs. He had that one good start against the Astros, but really did nothing else in his time with Kansas City. But he'll still get paid pretty well this offseason, so I expect he will. I expect the Jays will try to pursue him. Again, adds a little fire to that roster, very similar to Marcus Stroman in his energy levels. But you never know with the history that the Royals have had with the Jays this year. You never know if that's something that the Jays might not want to pursue. I could also see them going after someone like Jordan Zimmerman of the Nationals, or even Jeff Samardzija, who I'm not a huge fan of personally, but I could see how he could help this team for sure. So we'll see. I think there are a lot of different options. Even someone like Doug Fister, you could see on the Jays, but I think next year is kind of their chance. Next year is their chance, their last chance to go after it. If you look at who we're going to lose at the end of next year is kind of the chance to go at it, maybe win a World Series, maybe not end up in a top 4 place. So yeah, so we'll see. I think definitely names to watch out for are Cueto, Fister, Zimmerman, and Samardzija. I expect to see one of them on the Jays, probably not two. You'll see hopefully one of them, and then maybe another guy like Yovani Gallardo, who has shredded the Jays over the years. So yeah, I think if you could fill out a rotation with one of those 4 guys, plus like a Yovani Gallardo, or even someone who's not as solid, like Hisashi Iwakuma. I mean, he would not be a bad 4th pitcher for sure. Scott Kazmir, maybe even John Lackey. So if you could fill your roster out, your starting rotation with people like that, then I think you're looking at fairly solid. I'm not going to say plethora, but fairly solid rotation. At the end of the day, with this offense, you don't need to go out and put up 7 innings of 1-run ball every single night either. You just need guys to get you the innings, get you 200 innings a year. So I expect they'll pursue starting pitching in the offseason along with relief pitching. We definitely need a middle reliever. Lowe's probably on his way out, so that'll be a void we need to fill. That kind of 6 to 7 inning role will be important. Yeah, I expect the Jays to be very active in the post or in the off-season free agent signings. But then your other option would be just to go out and trade for players, which I don't expect they'll do. I expect they'll try to buy their way to a championship rather than trade even more of the prospects, the little prospects that we have after the trade deadline. I mean, you could go and dig into the offense, try to trade from there, but I doubt they'll do that. So yeah, so that's it for the Blue Jays. I guess a disappointing loss for sure to the Royals, but I think this offseason is going to be really interesting to see what they do in terms of what their plan really is for next year and what they're going to do to try to build this team back up as a contender it was this year, because it was exciting. I think they're not going to have an issue attracting free agents because they saw the atmosphere that was brought to the Rogers Center when you put a good team out there. So we'll see. It'll be very interesting to find out how this team's going to pursue next season. As some of you might know, the Raptors start their season on Wednesday. I think we're in for a bit of a surprise. It's definitely going to be a changed Raptors team. I know a lot of people were disappointed after we got swept by the Wizards last year in 4 games in the first round of the playoffs. I know I was certainly very disappointed, and I think that series definitely showed the holes that the Raptors had in their organization, I should say. They went out and fixed a lot of those problems. A lot of them were defensive problems. They just couldn't shut anyone down. The team, they were bad. They were a bad defensive team. If you look at the defensive win shares that the players leaving provided, it turned into a total of 4.8. So that's pretty much a measurement of how good players are leaving. Players are defensively. And the 7 players that left the Raptors combined for a total win share of 4.8. So less than a single win defensively per player that left. Amir Johnson topped that with 1.6 defensive win shares. And then if you look at guys like Lou Williams, Grievous Vasquez, Tyler Hansborough, even someone like Chuck Hayes, were just terrible defensively. So I think the Raptors definitely addressed that issue this offseason, bringing in some guys like Damari Carroll, even people like Luis Scola and Bismack Biyombo are definitely defensive-minded players. Scola's a bit more offensive, but can get it done on the defensive end of the floor. And then if you look at the guys they drafted, DeLon Wright and Norman Powell, definitely defensive-minded players that are going to help this roster out. So I think this team has the chance to turn some heads. I know a lot of people have kind of projected the Raptors to finish around 5th or 6th in the conference, 1st in the division. But of course, they changed the rule this year that you're not guaranteed a top 4 spot as a division winner. So hovering around that 5-6 area is where a lot of people have the Raptors. But you know what? I think this team could do better than that. I think the Cavaliers are obviously the class of the East. But I think this year, yeah, they could definitely make a run for it. I think this offseason they definitely focused on what I'm going to say are the three Ds and how they're going to become a low-key powerhouse with these 3 Ds. The 3 Ds are obviously the defense, which I talked about, depth, and then the division they play in. They're a much deeper team than they were last year. I mean, if you look at some of the guys they brought in when Anthony Bennett, Johnson, Ross, Joseph, Biyombo make up your second or even third string of players, you're doing something right. So I think I think this team definitely has the depth to go far. They're not going to rely on Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan for all their scoring, although they looked excellent in the preseason. DeRozan not so much, but Lowry and his new physical stature looks fantastic in the preseason. So I think this team isn't going to necessarily have to rely on them like they did last year. And then obviously those role players are definitely defensive minded, which is certainly going to help the team out when it comes down to winning tight games, games where the ball just isn't dropping for them. I mean, if you look at the 7 preseason games they've had, they've allowed 100 points or fewer in 6 of them, which is a great start for this team looking to become more defensive minded. And then the last one would definitely be their division. I think the fact that they get to play so many games against, I'm going to say, weaker opponents is only going to help them rack up the wins. I mean, I don't think they're necessarily going to get to that 50-win mark. I think they'll be close. But I think they have the potential to definitely soar over it just based on their schedule. I mean, Boston is going to be a very good team this year. I think in comparison to what what people are projecting them, where they're projecting them to finish. They have a great coach, solid players, and I think they could do some damage. But other than that, the division, the Nets are going to be terrible this year. 76ers are still rebuilding, and the Knicks are just the Knicks. So I think it's going to be there are going to be some tough games. Obviously, division games are very tough, but I don't think the Raptors are going to have any problems within their division winning it for sure. I'm very intrigued by the Celtics matchups, though. I think the Celtics could give the Raptors some problems. They're quick, but also very powerful. So I think that'll be a good defensive test. So we'll see how the season goes. I think they could finish anywhere from third in the conference to as low as 7th, really. So I think it'll be an interesting season for sure. Hopefully we have a little more playoff success. I think the defense will help. It'll just depend on how Dwayne Casey decides to coach his team and how he wants to use his players. I think there's going to be a lot of decisions he has to make around who's going to play, where people are going to play. I mean, the 4 spot is just a mess right now with Scola, Patterson, Bennett, and Johnson. I mean, you could pretty much pick any of those guys to play the 4 if you please. It just depends on who Casey wants to go with and roll with. So we'll see how the season goes. I'm expecting big things. I think Jonas Valanciunas is going to have a nice year. DeRozan, I mean, he's when he's on, he's on. And Kyle Lowry, I think that new body is definitely going to help kind of propel him to that next level of NBA excellence. So I'm looking forward to the season. Again, it starts Wednesday, 7:30 against the Pacers. For those of you who want to watch, I believe it's going to be shown on TSN. So make sure you check it out. I think we're in for a treat. So last thing I want to talk about today, just some quick fire thoughts from the 4 major professional sports leagues, so the NBA, MLB, NHL, and NFL. So just start off with the NBA. I'm just going to do my predictions on the year. So in terms of the champions, I think you're going to see, I know this isn't a popular pick, but I think you're going to see the San Antonio Spurs lift the Larry O'Brien trophy. I think they're going to beat the Cavs in the finals. I mean, that team is deep. Like, if you look at some of the guys they brought in, they're older. But, I mean, how could you go wrong with a starting 5 of Tony Parker, Danny Green, Kawhi Leonard, LaMarcus Aldridge, and Tim Duncan? I mean, that's tough for any team to match up against. So I think they're going to win the trophy over the Cavs in the final. I think the Cavs are going to run away with the East. I think the Spurs just have the depth to beat the Cavs. The Cavs, they're not a fantastically skilled ball club. I mean, obviously LeBron James helps with that, but they don't necessarily have the skill or the depth to compete with the Spurs over a 7-game series. So that's who I'm calling. I'm calling the Spurs over the Cavs in the final. The biggest surprise of the year, I think, is going to be the Minnesota Timberwolves. They're not a terrible team. I mean, Karl Anthony Towns is just an absolute beast. He's going to. I think he's going to have a great year. I think he's going to mesh very quickly with the likes of Ricky Rubio and Andrew Wiggins. I think they're obviously going to improve upon their 16 wins, but I could even see them doubling it to 32. Maybe even go as high as 35 wins. They're certainly not a playoff team, especially in that Western Conference. But I think they're going to surprise a lot of people with the developments they've made and how good they're actually going to be this year. And then the biggest flop, I think, is going to be the Portland Trailblazers. This is just a bad team. If you look at players they lost this offseason, really the only player I would even consider starting on any other team is Damian Lillard. I mean, he's a fantastic player, don't get me wrong, but if you look at some of the other starters they have, they're people that you would not want starting in any roster, on any roster, I should say, let alone having four of them on one team. They're not deep, they're not very deep either. So I could see the Portland Trailblazers ending up with the top pick in next year's NBA draft, unfortunately. I just don't see them being able to compete with anyone with their lack of skill and then lack of depth. So we'll see what happens with that team, but I don't expect much. All right, moving on to the MLB. Obviously the World Series starts Tuesday. So if you want my prediction, I'm going with the Mets. I think that their pitching and their power is just going to overpower the Kansas City Royals. I think that you're going to end up seeing Matt Harvey and Jacob deGrom just crush the Royals in the first two games of the series. I think the Jays series was very emotional series for them, for the Royals. And I don't think they're going to be ready to come out of the gate and face such quality pitching against them. And then the only other comment I'm going to say is, as a Blue Jays fan, come Game 3, it's going to be very hard for me to watch Noah Syndergaard pitch to Travis d'Arnaud in a World Series game. Obviously, those two were the key pieces in the R.A. Dickey trade. So that'll be a little tough to watch, but I think it'll be tough for Syndergaard to win that game. First start in the World Series at home. He could pull it off. I hope he does. Again, it's going to be tough to watch as a Jays fan, them pitch to each other. But yeah, I wish the Mets all the best. I think they're a great team. I expect this series will only last 5 or 6 games. I just don't think the Royals have the depth to go toe to toe with the Mets, and obviously the Mets have a better pitching staff than the Jays did. The only real advantage I see is the Royals bullpen, but if they can't get the game to Herrera and Davis, the Royals, that is, I can't see them causing any problems to the Mets. So I think it'll be a great World Series. Again, starts Tuesday. I'm looking forward to it. Like I said, Mets in 5 or 6. That's what I'm calling. In terms of the NHL, I haven't watched a whole lot. But Montreal is a really, really good team. I know that sounds obvious based on their start. They just have the whole package. You're able to score, and then they defend like crazy. And then obviously you have Carey Price back there just to shut the doors. So that's a scary good team. I know a lot of people were wondering where the goals were going to come from this offseason, but that is a very, very solid hockey team they have over there in Quebec. So I could definitely see them riding this. I don't think they're going to falter. I think they're going to end up winning the Stanley Cup. In terms of win projections, you know what, I could honestly see them winning 50 to 55 games this year, which would be incredible. 55 wins, I'm going to say, which is for a team who might struggle to score goals like people thought they would early in the year is very solid. That's how good their defense and goaltending has been so far this year. And on the other side, as a Leafs fan, pains me to say this, but they are just a bad team. Like it's painful to watch them play special teams just because they're not skillful. They're not skilled enough. Um, Obviously, the heart is there. Babcock kind of instilled a um, underdog like mentality in them, but they are just a bad team, and I don't see them breaking out of this slump. Uh, Through this year, I expect you'll see them get another lottery pick at the end of it. But unfortunately, if you're a Leafs fan, you're just gonna have to grin and bear it this year because it's not gonna get any better. And then my surprise in the NHL is the Ducks. Like, what has happened to the Ducks? They can't put a puck in the back of the net to save their lives. Corey Perry and Ryan Getzlaf have been absolutely terrible. Other than one game, the only game they've won, which they scored 4 goals in, they have 2 goals in the rest of them. They've been shut out 4 times this year, and they just don't look good. They don't look comfortable. A preseason Stanley Cup contender just can't seem to live up to the hype. So I'll be interested to see what happens to them. I think you'll see them eventually turn around. Maybe get a lower seeded spot in the playoffs. It's certainly a very weird start. I'd be if he keeps up. I'd be shocked if Bruce Boudreau is able to keep his job. But we'll see how it goes. Again, things can change. It's a long year, but a very disappointing start for the Ducks. Finally, the NFL. As a Dolphins fan, I was very excited by yesterday's result. But one thing I want to take away is that Arian Foster has to be one of the unluckiest players in the entire league. I mean, that dude he's so good, but he's so injury prone that it's unfortunate, to be honest. He's such a talent. Yesterday, obviously tearing his Achilles on a non-contact play. He's trying to set himself, trying to push off to run a passer, and it just kind of gave out, and you could see the pain he was in afterwards. It's tough because he works so hard. He's just been so plagued by injuries that I think it's going to be tough for him to ever kind of maintain consistency and be that true NFL star anymore, especially the age he is. So very unlucky. I wish him all the best. Hopefully he gets better. Yeah, an unfortunate injury for sure. 2 surprise teams, definitely the Oakland Raiders and the Jacksonville Jaguars. These teams are putting up points. And I don't think anyone thought the rebuild was going to be this quick for those teams. Now, I'm not saying they're playoff teams by any means, because they're not. At least in my opinion. But like they look good. Once they get the defenses sorted out on those teams, I think you're going to see contenders, playoff contenders for sure. I mean, Derek Carr looked fantastic. He was shredding the Chargers up yesterday. And I mean, both teams are kind of built around young quarterback, young running back. I mean, obviously in Oakland you have Derek Carr, Latavius Murray. Then if you look at Jacksonville, you have Blake Bortles and T.J. Yeldon. So I think definitely things to build on in the future. I don't think anyone would thought the offense would be clicking this quickly for both teams, but it's certainly exciting to see those teams that kind of been the laughingstock of the league for years now build themselves up as quickly as they have, get kind of meaningful playing time in for all those rookies. So it's certainly exciting. And then disappointment are the Colts. Like, that offensive line is just terrible. They're struggling to block anyone, keeping Andrew Luck upright. Obviously, I think Luck hasn't played to his potential this year, but that offensive line is certainly not helping them out. So we'll see. I mean, they're going to win the division. The rest of their division is just they just don't have it right now. Obviously, the Jags are in there, but they just don't have it right now to contend with the Colts. But I wouldn't be surprised if you saw an 8-8 Colts team, or even a 7-9 Colts team take that division title. So hopefully they're able to turn it around, but with that offensive line, I just can't see it happening. So we'll see what happens. Certainly going to be an exciting NFL season. Monday Night Football tonight finishes off Week 7. You got the Ravens playing the Cardinals. So we'll see about that game. I expect the Cardinals to take it handily, but you never know. The Ravens have not played to their potential this year, but they're the Ravens. They're a scary team sometimes. So anyways, that's it for the first episode. I hope you enjoyed it. We're going to try to do it again sometime soon, talk about some other issues, hopefully after the Raptors' first game, so we can analyze how it went. Thanks for listening.